Welcome to another episode of Social PR Secrets. My name is Lisa Beyer, and I'll be your host. Today's guest is Cathy Hackl. Cathy has been a guest of mine and several times, and you have heard several of her interviews. If you haven't, go back and hear some of the past episodes. Cathy is a futurist when it comes to public relations, augmented reality, virtual reality, mixed reality, and technology in general. In past episodes, we've talked about how AR and VR is impacting the public relations and marketing world. In this episode, Cathy gives us an update on where we stand post-COVID and how AR, VR, XR, MR are all integrating into our everyday work life. Find out all the details in this episode and more, and also pick up Cathy's next book, mark your calendars, it comes out in December, called The Augmented Workforce. Welcome, Cathy, and namaste. Hi, and welcome to another episode of Social PR Secrets, the podcast. Today, I am here with Cathy Hackl. Hey, Cathy.
Hey, Lisa. Thanks for having me.
So if you've been listening to Social PR Secrets, the podcast, you might have noticed that Cathy has been one of my previous guests, probably the most visited back, right? Most invited back. Cathy and I go way back also. But I want to just kind of let you know her title. So she is a futurist when it comes to PR, XR, MR, VR, AR, and originally starting in television and journalism. So Cathy, just go a little bit deeper. Tell us where you started and where you are today and about your book coming out.
Yeah. So, and thanks for having me back. I mean, I guess that means I'm a good guest.
You are.
You keep having me back. So I appreciate that. Yeah, I started in journalism. I always say I started in storytelling, and I always knew I wanted to be a journalist. I thought I wanted to be on TV. I majored in broadcast, worked for companies like CNN, ABC News, Discovery Channel, both in front of the camera and behind the camera. And then I actually, through life, I decided to pivot into PR and marketing, and I did that for a few years, and then went into tech. But my story of tech on how I got there is quite interesting, and it's related to my time in television. So back in 2004, I was working for CNN, and part of my role was to look at all the raw footage that was coming in from the war in Iraq, right? So you can imagine, Lisa, just not things that were just not pleasant. So I always say I was a Facebook moderator before there were Facebook moderators. And when you have that kind of role and you do something like that, you have to turn your humanity dial just a little bit, right, to get by. And it wasn't until about 5 years ago when I went to a conference like we used to in the past before COVID, and put on a virtual reality headset and went into an experience called Confinement by The Guardian. And it puts you in a solitary confinement cell that's 6 by 9 meters, and prisoners spend 90% of their time. And, within seconds, Lisa, I was just completely claustrophobic. And you've done experiences. So
Yes.
Yeah. So I took the headset off. I was transformed. I said, this is the future of storytelling on some level. This is what I want to do for the rest of my life. And fast forward, here I am. For the people that don't know me, I've been in the VR AR industry for several years, considered one of the top women in the space. I've worked with companies like HTC Vive, Magic Leap. I was Oculus Launchpad in 2017, which is a special cohort that they had for fellows. And it's been a wild ride.
It has. And I have to also plug your book, Marketing New Realities, which I wrote the foreword to. So this book is awesome for if you're in the marketing, digital marketing field, public relations, branding, any type of communications. If you just really want to get I don't want to say the basics, but like the real deal on AR, VR, XR, MR, which augmented reality, virtual reality, mixed reality, and what's that last one?
Extended reality.
Extended
Depends
reality.
on who you ask, but I always say all the R's to come, and all the R's to come.
Yes. And you also put on a conference. Was that a year ago now or 2 years ago?
That was November of 2018.
Yeah.
So a long time ago, but
and that was an amazing, very forward-thinking conference. And so here we are today. And what's happening now? Like how do you see AR, VR, and MR and XR fitting into the Marcom place of being?
Yeah, I see several things. One of them is a huge acceleration towards adoption. I feel like in many industries, technology has been advanced quickly. We've advanced 2 years into the future when it comes to tech in the last 2 months, right?
Yeah,
So
definitely.
definitely, I think we're all on Zoom now, and so the same thing with AR and VR. I mean, there's companies like LibreStream, which is a company that offers AR and AI driven solutions to the enterprise, and they've just raised a good amount of money, and I mean they've seen their workload like increase 300x in the last months because of
Really.
the pandemic. It's crazy.
Yeah.
So it's not a question of like, is this technology here? No, it's here to stay. It's going to get further accelerated. So I'm seeing that also for collaboration, going into a virtual space, whether it's in augmented reality or in virtual reality, and be able to have meetings and have that sense of presence is another exciting part. I mean, we're both friends with Nava Berg, who's like a social VR goddess.
Yes. She's
Yeah.
gonna she's gonna be on the show. She's just waiting to get her scheduled.
Oh, that's great. So anyone
Yeah.
listening, you need to tune into that episode. She's
Yeah.
fantastic. But that having that sense of presence and kind of feeling like you're really there without being there, I think that's going to be huge. Another thing that I've really gotten into, and I've started to contribute to Forbes. They reached out to me and asked me to be a contributor to their CMO network. So I've been writing some really futuristic things, and one of my latest stories is called Marketing to Robots: Why CMOs Need to Start Thinking About Business to Robot to Consumer. So B2R2C, not
Wow.
R2D2, no,
Yeah.
B2R2C.
Yes, yes.
And how, the gist of that, and what I'm seeing there, Lisa, is that as our virtual assistants and virtual beings and all these different types of virtualized things that are happening in our lives, and the more we get used to them and the more we use them, they will become these gatekeepers. They will become the gatekeepers between brands and consumers, and they're going to know what we need before we need it. And eventually it's going to be up to businesses, whether it's marketers or PR comms, to have to in some way market to these robots. So very interesting trend coming up.
What brands are doing this, or what brands can you see being the first to market or the first to implement and try this out?
Yeah, we're starting to see, several examples of this. So, I actually, another article I just wrote for Forbes deals exactly with this topic. There's, for example, an organization called the AI Foundation,
Mm.
and they've been partnering with Deepak Chopra and Sir Richard Branson to create virtual AIs of themselves. And they recently worked on an AI chef that will be launching soon. And the AI chef actually learns about what you have in your home, learns about what you've been purchasing, helps you cook, more so than just Alexa, because this is an embodied, let's say an embodied AI. So very interesting. I think you're going to be seeing a trend there. That's interesting. People think at first, people are like, "What are you talking about? Marketing to robots? This is crazy." And once they go read the article, they're like, "Okay, this makes total sense to me."
We're going to have to all go read that article for sure. So it makes me
Yeah.
think, are we going to be writing and pitching press releases to robots?
Possibly. I mean, if you look at all the people getting fired from, from the press, from press, I mean, New York Times, you name it, right? Microsoft, their whole news department got fired. So, media, both internally and externally, yes, you will be in some point having to pitch, your product or your communications to, or your messages to these virtual beings and entities. So I definitely find that very interesting. Another thing is interesting, I think, for the PR and comms people is, and I've said this since, for years, you've heard me say it,
Yeah.
ever since I launched the world's first holographic press release. I said, look, eventually with media, they're all investing in augmented reality, virtual reality, whether you're New York Times, Washington Post, USA Today, Weather Channel, you name it, even ESPN, all of them, right? They're using AR in some level. So if you're a smart PR agency or PR company, you're going to start providing them these 3D assets, whether it's a volumetric scan of your CEO during your shareholders meeting, or whether it's 3D assets of your latest building that's going to go in downtown. It's going to be a way for you to pitch and get in the news faster.
Awesome. Yeah. And so let's just backtrack a second.
Yeah.
You talked about some of the collaboration and the different rooms that we could use. Let's just say instead of, it's a different experience than we're actually talking right now and we can see each other thanks to Zoom, but you could go into Facebook. We used to have Facebook Spaces. So now what's the next big thing coming from Facebook do we know that's going to be the next Facebook Spaces, and where can somebody go and create a room for their business and collaborate if they wanted to right now with the right equipment?
Well, Facebook had announced Facebook Horizon.
Oh, right. Facebook
But
Horizons. Right.
yeah, but I don't have a lot of information on that. I think, we'll have to see. There's definitely other apps out there where you can have these kind of virtual meetings. I would say there's one called Spatial, which I've used a lot and it's free, spatial.io, and you can use it on your Oculus Quest. I believe in desktop, but I'm not sure about that. And then Magic Leap, which is the company I used to work for that makes augmented reality glasses. So you put on the glasses, they're a little steampunk looking, kind of funky, but you can see reality. And we would have our sales meetings, our sales teams meetings in Spatial. So I'll give you this funny anecdote. My daughter heard me in the office. I'm wearing my Magic Leap glasses, which are, behind me. If we're not doing video, but they're right behind me. And she came in and she was like, "Who are you talking to, Mom?" And I took my Magic Leap off and I put it on her, and all of a sudden she sees about 10 to 12 of my coworkers' avatars
That's so funny.
in my office in a spreadsheet. And she's like, "Whoa, Mom, you're actually having a meeting." And I said, "Yes, honey, these are the meetings of the future." So she left and she was like, "Okay, so now when I hear Mom and she's wearing her headset, I know she's busy." So that's one. I tried out one today, actually, called TEEOH. I believe that's how you spell it. It wasn't a job interview. It was more kind of like an advisor interview for a company in the platform. And that was pretty interesting. I thought it was pretty easy to use. You can use it on your iPad or your iPhone or your Android. And yeah, and it was cool. It felt like I was in person, without necessarily being in person. So.
And if you're in the public relations field, what do you suggest to get started just to educate yourself? I mean, we could go buy your book, but should we get a headset? I mean, I have my headset when I was teaching yoga and virtual reality and kind of playing around in Facebook Spaces just to learn the different platforms, just to learn the lingo and, be able to talk the talk. And, what would you recommend if there was something you wanted to add to the list?
Yeah, I would definitely say if you can get your hands on an Oculus Quest, that's probably the headset I would buy for an entry level. Oculus Go, which is the lower tier one, is actually, Oculus is not going to support it in a couple months, so I wouldn't invest money on that one. But definitely, that following, folks like me or Nava that are very much involved in the industry and reading what we're talking about, definitely I think is valuable and exploring. Not too long ago, I was having conversations with the CEO of a big PR firm about how to use VR for media training, right?
Yeah.
So instead of doing the media training where you do role play, live action, let's say,
Yeah.
role playing,
I
you're
love
doing
that.
it. Yeah, you're doing it in VR and actually putting the person in this studio and shining the lights on them or what have you. So, so I definitely think there's a lot of application there.
And also coming from your experience being on the media side and the journalism side, and now
Yeah.
you were on the PR side and now you're on the more of the tech side, what advice do you give for reaching out and getting media coverage, pitching the media in today's climate?
Yeah, I mean, innovation goes a long way. I think, if you're doing something truly innovative, think about how to pitch that, how to make it sound more innovative. Go to the industry, the industry publications as well. If you're doing anything in AR and VR, why not share it with the industry publications in AR and VR instead of just thinking, big tech, Wired. I mean, great. It's great if you get in Wired, right? But why not also add some of those industry publications? Definitely, sharing your news with business influencers within the industry. Obviously you and I both know influencer marketing is huge and micro influencers are very important. So definitely, having them promote your message as well.
Those are great tips.
Mm-hmm.
And you said that you're a contributor for Forbes and writing a column for CMOs. So what does today's CMO need to know about this type of technology and adapting it into their marketing plan?
Well, one of the things they need to know is that it's here, it's not moving. Lots of brands are already experimenting with it. you need to be prepared. And this is the main reason I say this is the following. Once Apple or Facebook come to market with augmented reality glasses, and they will because they've said so, um, then they're, every marketing department and agency is going to go like, oh my goodness, what are we going to do? But if you prepare beforehand and you have your team of creatives and your marketing team start to think about how do you tell stories on a totally different plane, like it's not a linear plane, but a spatial plane. You start to think about that, then you'll be better prepared, right? It'll be the same thing as when mobile came out. Oh, that will never take off.
Right,
I don't
right.
need to be on mobile. I don't need to be on social. I mean, I've heard it all, right? It's
Yeah.
like, I don't need to do AR and VR. I'm like, maybe VR, I don't know 100% if you need to do VR, but augmented reality, once those come out, it's game over. So yeah, it'll be, you need to prepare yourself for what's coming because marketing will be a totally different ballgame.
Yeah, and I think one of the topics you hit on are the keywords, creative. And so
Yeah.
there's so much you can do from a creative standpoint. And even, I mean, one of the ways that we dabbled in it would, when we would go on Facebook Spaces, and you could take photos of your avatar in
Mm-hmm.
different backgrounds, and it looked, I mean, it was just so cool. And so we use that as our featured image for our blog posts, and it would be just a way to for us to
Yeah.
experiment with art and creating things that in virtual reality. And it was so cool. So I think that if anybody could go and experiment with
Yeah.
how what that looks like and what that feels like to actually do it, even if it's just like playing around and like writing your name and
Mm-hmm.
playing games or meeting somebody on some sort of platform and interacting with them.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think it's Chris Milk, who's a famous VR producer, says talking about virtual reality is like dancing about architecture.
Yeah.
It's very hard. You won't really understand it until you put on a headset and experience it.
And it's more than just going to, which we did this together. We went to
Mm-hmm.
the Star Wars virtual reality.
That was so much fun.
Yeah, that was so fun. But it's more than that. It's not just
Yeah.
the gaming VR side of it. It's really the creative and content creation side and social VR side and all the
Yeah.
different the training side. The ways that you can tell your story is
Mm-hmm.
that's how you started talking about this, is storytelling. And instead of doing the press release, you can get a headset and send a headset and meet somebody in VR and like
Yeah.
explain to them here's what it feels like to I'm just using the example be
Mm-hmm.
depressed because that's one
Yeah.
of the examples that it's just there's so many, it's the emotions involved are just surreal. You have to
Yeah.
just get in there.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree. I think it's truly impactful. It's a totally different way to tell stories, and I think that one of the biggest things that people can take away from our conversation and make it all make sense is basically what you're seeing is we have our digital personas, right? Who we are one person on social media, and we are a different person in our physical world. And what's slowly happening is that we're slowly merging that physical and virtual at the same time. So, and you'll see this with younger children on Fortnite, on Animal Crossing, on Roblox. Um, their identity goes beyond just their physical selves, right? So what you're seeing is this merging. And with augmented reality, once we have those glasses, and once the world is really the stage, once the world really is the billboard, that is going to change marketing and communications.
Yeah, and I mean, I think a great example of augmented reality 101 is just when Snapchat hit, you know, the apps, and you're able to create all this different type of, using augmented reality with all of
Yeah.
these lenses and filters, and that really brought it to mainstream, and
Yeah.
more on the consumer level, but you can get an idea through that as just
Yeah.
like your most basic example.
Well, and when you look at the signals and you look at the horizon, if you look at what Apple announced not too long ago with Apple Clips, right? These little QR codes that are round and you're going to be pointing your phone at. What they're really doing here, Lisa, is training people to look at those codes through their camera, and eventually what they're going to be is going to be round glasses. And people are going to look at those codes and access information, so they're being trained to have this behavior. They're priming their consumers, and the more people use these Apple Clips, the more data they will have as to when the market is ready. So
And
very smart move.
what are some other examples of like the Apple Clips examples that maybe would be something that is on the horizon or here that is accessible to experiment with?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really interesting question. I think thinking about many people have usually heard the term digital twin, right? More on an enterprise or manufacturing concept. But that really is, we are creating our digital twins. We already have kind of our digital footprints and our digital twins. So starting to think about that and maybe it's hard for me to kind of like talk about today because I always live in the future. You know me, I'm out on the fringe. So that was like, okay, well, let's think about today, right? But one thing I'll tell you, like, if someone's listening to this and they work with their CEO, starting to think about, who owns the CEO's tweets. Is the CEO someone that you're eventually going to want to bring back as a hologram for a shareholders meeting? Like, there's so many things there to think about in that virtualized world that is very relevant to communications and PR.
It so is. And it reminds me, I'm going to put this in the show notes because you're just talking about like the whole hologram example
Yeah.
and, creating a hologram of ourselves so we don't have to actually physically go to a meeting, especially now with COVID, travel is
Mhm.
basically at a standstill. It's never been more relevant and more like, okay, we need this now. Now it's a
Yeah.
necessity. What is the name of the video? I think it was by Microsoft that just shows that kind of story of like collaboration in a retail. They're building out a retail experience, and
Yeah, that was Microsoft HoloLens
yeah,
where
yeah.
they're
So
doing that. Exactly.
yeah, so
Yeah.
I'm going to put that in the show notes because I think it's just such a great
Hmm.
visual of what the future is.
Yeah.
Sooner than later, it's happening, and
Yeah.
I think COVID is pushing it forward quicker.
I'll give you a cool example of from
Yeah.
today, like a case
Okay.
study that literally just came out. There's a startup out of the UK called Synthesia. I can't pronounce Synthesia. And what they do is they're using AI to create these videos where someone, for example, let's say I'm an important YouTuber and I record my video in English. Using their technology, the video is actually able to be seen in China in Chinese with the YouTuber moving their lips in a natural way that looks like they're speaking Chinese.
Wow,
Right. So
that's
it's
so
super
cool.
powerful.
Yes.
And they just did a campaign with Snoop Dogg. There was an agency that hired Snoop Dogg to do a video of a company called Just Eat. And they recorded the video, etc. And Just Eat's subsidiary in Australia is called Menulog. And instead of having to, they recorded the ad, the commercial only saying Just Eat. But using this technology, they were able to use the AI to actually have the commercial say menu log, have Snoop say menu log, and have everything say menu log in a very natural way. You wouldn't even notice
Wow.
through AI. And I thought that was powerful, the huge cost savings for the brand right there. Like you don't have to shoot it twice. So imagine, I think that you were going to probably see that being used more and more.
Yeah, and I think I was just watching on over the weekend on the Today Show just how movies are now going back to being,
Yeah.
going back into production, and they're trying to save money and not have to do as many takes
Hmm.
because it just everything is so much more expensive and social distancing. So that seems like a perfect example of, instead of
Yeah.
having to correct something, they could just go in and use AI to do it.
Hmm.
So interesting. We
Yeah.
could go on forever,
Yeah. So
right? But
exciting times
Cathy,
ahead.
it is. So you are the futurist woman, and you are also coming out with a book this
Mhm.
fall or December called Augmented Workforce. So if you could just give us a couple quick insights into that, and I know that our time is coming to a close. So what does the
Yeah.
augmented workforce look like?
Yeah. So the book's called The Augmented Workforce: How AI, AR, and 5G Will Impact Every Dollar You Make. And basically it's a look at, I think people are always obsessed with thinking about these technologies replacing workers. And while there is a level of automation, a level of workers being replaced, there is a level of replacement. There's also a level that is complementary, right? These technologies will augment our workers, will allow them to do their works better and more proficiently. And that's kind of what the book alludes to that part of looking at how these technologies were being used, how are they being used, how will they be used in the future. And one of the reasons that we created that title, and this is a funny story, is because we were thinking, my co-author John Bazell and I were thinking, if I were at an airport, which we're obviously not traveling right now, but if I were at an airport and I saw a business book, what title would what book would I grab? So we said, okay, we came up with the title. We said it was super catchy, super perfect for kind of what we're attempting to do. So definitely, it's a business book. It's for leaders. It's for managers. It's for everyone interested in better understanding how these technologies are going to impact their industries, how they're being used, and what's to come.
Awesome. Well, we're definitely going to put it on the list for the future pickup. And then for now, we'll put your Marketing Your Realities on the list. And any other tips or any other books or sources you want to share with us? And
no, definitely follow me on LinkedIn. I'm one of the top technology voices on LinkedIn, so share great content there. Yeah, I have a newsletter on LinkedIn as well, so follow me there. Lots of crazy, amazing content.
Cathy Hackl, thank you so much for giving us all this futurist news and trends. And hopefully you will be back again. We'll
I
catch
hope
up
so.
with
Maybe
you.
next time I'll send my avatar.
Yes, send your avatar. Our holograms will meet each other, right?
There we go. I love that. Thank you, Lisa.
Okay, awesome. Bye. Thank you for listening to this episode of Social PR Secrets. If you like what you heard, check out the book on Amazon or follow our blog at socialprsecrets.com. This episode was sponsored by The Buyer Group, a social PR agency striving to keep our balance in the digital world, practicing public relations, social media, and search marketing, while occasionally drinking a glass of wine or two for the best creativity and results. Thank you all for tuning in. If you would like to get a free chapter of Social PR Secrets, go to socialprsecrets.com/free.